I come to Argentina now, I think almost once a year or once every year and a half, 2 years, to be re-energized about the spirit of crypto. Because the spirit of crypto is alive in this country. And I come here every now and then just to refill my crypto batteries and be like, yeah, that's why we do it.
Great. It's great to recharge your crypto batteries here.
Yes.
Hola a todos, hi everyone, bienvenidos. Estamos aquí con Andreas Antonopoulos en Buenos Aires. Es un honor tenerlo a Andreas con nosotros. Andreas, a los que no lo conocen, es uno de los speakers y educadores más populares en cuanto a tecnología blockchain, Bitcoin y criptomonedas. It's a real honor to have you here with us, Andreas. Let's start with an open question. Why Bitcoin matters today?
Bitcoin matters because people need choices, and these choices can't all be state-controlled money that people have very little option to change or to control in any way. And the thing is, it's very difficult to explain why Bitcoin matters to a North American or to a Western European, because their money works. But that's the experience of less than 10% of the human population. And for the other 90%, it's a bit like Argentina. When I try to explain Bitcoin here, people are not asking why you need money that's not controlled by governments. They're asking, how do I get some? Because I already know why we need it. I mean, you only need free, post-national, neutral, open, borderless, censorship-resistant money if you live in a country that has a corrupt government or corrupt banking system or organized chaos or unpredictable human behavior or periodic crises with your money or currency controls or censorship or political instability or dictatorship. Oh, that's the entire world with few exceptions, right? So, yeah, that's why.
Okay, let's say someone wants to get into Bitcoin for the first time. Would you advise him or her to get into finance and the origin of money and to study more, or before getting into Bitcoin? Would you say that would be the correct steps?
No, I wouldn't. In fact, I don't think that's important. That will come later, no more than if somebody was asking me to use the internet for the first time, would I start explaining routing algorithms? That's not particularly useful. What I would usually do is help them choose a wallet, teach them how to use it and how to make a backup, and then show them how to do a transaction. I am a big advocate of earning Bitcoin, not buying it.
Okay.
So I think it's more important for people to see how Bitcoin can be part of their day-to-day experience, and changing your relationship to the currency from something you see as an investment that you're going to buy and store and then wait, and then it gets much bigger and then you sell it and you're rich and you get a Lambo. Instead, I want this other experience, which is, well, what do you do for a living? Are you a hairdresser? You cut hair? Great. Offer to cut hair for Bitcoin. You probably won't find any clients at first, but maybe one day you will. You can make it part. You run a pizza shop, sell pizza for Bitcoin. You run a fruteria, sell fruit for Bitcoin. Whatever. Just incorporate it into your experience and live inside the economy instead of treating it as an investment.
And how about technical barriers for people that don't know about?
Oh, the technical barriers are enormous. It's difficult to use, it's difficult to secure. I mean, really, the only reason anyone would actually have to do all of the work required to overcome these technical barriers is, I don't know, like if your money was collapsing at a ridiculous rate, let's say 40% in a year, just as a theoretical example.
Yeah, let's say theoretical.
And at that point, necessity becomes the mother of invention, as we say, right? People will do the necessary work to learn something that will help them escape a situation that's outside of their control. So if what's at stake is the future of your children, and you want to make sure that the small amount of savings you have is actually worth something in 10 years or even next week, then you learn these things. And that's the fundamental difference I see in the attitudes between South America and, for example, North America.
Okay, and you're speaking about learning.
Yeah.
So not finance and not technology, you can like overcome these things to get into crypto and learn about why is it valuable.
It's very practical skills.
Yeah.
It's not learning the theory of how Bitcoin works or the theory of monetary economics or the politics and philosophy of cypherpunk. Those things will come if you're interested in some of the background information. It's the practical skills. What is this thing that starts with a 1 and has lots of letters after it? Can I show it to someone else? Is that safe or not? How do I change a price from Bitcoin to millibit? And what the hell is a Satoshi? How do I know what the exchange rate is? What is a transaction? Why is my transaction less than what I thought it was? Why is my wallet saying I have to pay a fee? Who gets the fee? Practical skills. These are the everyday learn how to use it skills. And they can be taught relatively quickly. And once you teach those skills, then people can start incorporating this in their life.
Okay, I mean, these things can be taught, but with other technologies, things move pretty fast. So things get outdated pretty quickly.
The basic skills don't change that much that often. I mean, the basics of making a Bitcoin transaction are exactly the same today as they were in 2012.
Yeah.
I don't think those skills are out of date. You might have to adjust them just a tiny bit. If you do it for 2 or 3 years, then suddenly you see another address. Oh, this one starts with a 3. What's that? Oh, let me teach you a bit more. And you know, but other than that, you only need some very basics to get started.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about cryptocurrencies. What are the main difference between the old Bitcoin market, just only Bitcoin market, and the current ecosystem with thousands of crypto assets available and a whole industry around it? Like, what are the main differences that you have seen living both worlds in such a short period of time?
Well, so for one thing, I predicted this back in 2014. I started talking about the explosion of currencies and how we would first see hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of different tokens, and some would have value and some would not. And we're going to see this explosion of experimentation. People get very upset with this topic. They think that the fact that I say the future is likely to be like this means that I want it to be like this or that I recommend it as a good thing. I'm just kind of observing that that's the direction we're going. You can like it or not like it, but you can't disagree with the fact that that's the direction we're going. And so I like to think that if you're a maximalist in this industry, then you have to fight with an increasing amount of contrary evidence every year. Last year, there were 800 cryptocurrencies telling you that you are wrong to be a maximalist. This year, there's 2,000 cryptocurrencies telling you you're wrong. In 5 years' time, there might be 20,000 examples saying that we're not going to a world of one system. That doesn't mean we're going to have a world with tens of thousands of currencies that have value or that have the same application. Quite the opposite, in fact. Maybe only 2 or 3 will have any significant value and use. But it's certainly difficult to argue that it's going to be just one. And I don't think that's necessarily a healthy perspective of the world. I think that in a world where we only had one choice and it was Bitcoin, that would be a worse world because that's a very dangerous thing to do, where the only choice we have. And if something goes wrong there, we have a monoculture of currencies. So I think that's maybe a dangerous, this is a very controversial opinion. And a lot of people disagree with me and they get very upset. But here's the thing, I'm very comfortable with the idea that I might be totally wrong. And none of us know, because this experiment has never happened before. We've never had a system whereby a 6-year-old can bootstrap their own currency, and it might actually become popular by accident. We've never lived in that world. Now we're in that world, and we're seeing it unfold. And we're all just going to have to wait a bit and see how this plays out, and be comfortable with uncertainty, and be comfortable with being wrong, and be comfortable with a future that's different from what we imagined. I'm comfortable with that. We'll see how it goes.
And for this next future crypto world with a few cryptos that are used for different kind of businesses of different kind of industry, and each currency with its proper use, what would be the things that have to happen for this crypto to become mainstream?
I don't know. I mean, I think the definition of mainstream itself is problematic, because I think these things can be very powerful even if they're adopted by just a few people in some area. And that may be a cryptocurrency that's adopted just by refugees would change the world in a radical way, even if no one else adopted it. A cryptocurrency that's adopted just in 3 countries in South America would change the world dramatically. And not adopted by their governments, just adopted by many people. Mainstream doesn't mean everyone in the world uses it all the time, right? We might see, I think, this kind of asymmetric emergence of currencies where in some area, for some reason, some application becomes very important. Some open blockchain happens to fit that need immediately, and then suddenly it erupts. And people may be surprised. You know, the people of Turkey escaping the Erdogan dictatorship with their collapsing currency may choose to use a cryptocurrency that happened to emerge in Turkey because someone translated the wallet into Turkish. And suddenly that's the one that takes off, and it's not the one you expected, but that's okay because it works for them. And again, I think we need to be comfortable with this idea that it's not linear, it's not universal, and it's not predictable. It's going to happen in random places for random reasons, and these are emergent phenomena. And they follow chaos theory, right?
Yeah.
A small change in initial conditions, and suddenly the entire thing goes in the opposite direction, and you don't know why, and nobody can know why.
Okay, so and how about what's different in the U.S. I mean, as Argentinians, as Latin Americans, we're seeing the necessity, and we understand that crypto has become so popular over the last few years because of that need. That's what we'll be discussing with you and with other people all over these years, and they all agree on that. But how about in the U.S.? What's the necessity in the U.S. and in Europe, where the situation is different?
Well, so in the U.S., you know, there's a very different culture towards innovation and technology than there is anywhere else in the world. That's one of the reasons why the U.S. is an amazing place to interact with technology and to build companies. One of the things that's very difficult to appreciate is this raw entrepreneurial spirit that exists in the U.S. It's the kind of place in the world where if you come up with a very, very radical idea, instead of everybody telling you there's no way that could work, and you shouldn't even try, people are like, oh, that's interesting, yeah, go for it. Like, America is exactly the place where someone can say, how about we make money without governments? And in most countries, everybody goes, what? What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. And in the States, people go, huh. And there's a very different attitude. So people think that things are possible. And that's an infectious idea. And it's not always right. And you know, it's not always based on fact or reality. Sometimes it's just an audacious, delusional idea. And the fact that the culture allows for audacious, delusional ideas to happen without asking anybody's permission makes it a very, very interesting place, especially for technology. So if you decide you want to build a rocket and launch it, or dig a tunnel under LA, you can actually do that. Weird things like that happen all the time. So in the US, we're going to see a different attitude towards cryptocurrencies. It's not necessity driven. It's driven by innovation. It's driven by speculation. It's driven by experimentation, and by a desire to try things that are new and different. In many countries, you have this conservative culture where people fear change. In the States, good or bad, people love change, and they're ready to throw away everything and start new, and reinvent themselves, their career, their companies, their products, the way the world works from their perspective. So that gives us opportunity. Now, not all the culture is like that, and there are many broken things about that too. But it brings a very different attitude, which is why you see a lot of the software engineering, a lot of the some of the new innovative ideas, and a lot of the most advanced companies operating out of the United States.
And having visited Buenos Aires and Argentina several times yourself, what are your thoughts on the entrepreneurial and innovation aspect of Argentinians?
So, I mean,
in the crypto ecosystem or outside it?
Yeah, so Argentina has a lot of people who are willing to try new ways of doing things, just because in many cases things don't work. Like when things break, you find creative ways to get around them. That creativity from necessity, the necessity to find ways to get around the fact that your currency is broken, or you go to the ATM and you put your card in, they don't have any cash. It's like, you're a cash machine. You had one job. You don't have cash. What are you now? A nothing machine, right? And you see, people don't appreciate, I think it's really funny, is if you put an American in that situation, they put their card into the machine and the machine says, we don't have any cash. They'll just look at it. And they'll probably spend 10 minutes going, what? Because this is an inconceivable idea, right? Whereas here it happens every Friday.
Yes.
And the reason it happens every Friday is because they refill the machines on Monday. And you have to be there on Tuesday and stand in line, because, by Wednesday you only get hundreds. By Thursday you can only do one withdrawal. And by Friday, sorry, find another bank. That makes people creative. It makes people adventurous. It makes people willing to try new things. And through that hardship, you find a lot of spirit, right? Now, the other thing that Argentina has, which is incredibly important, is Argentina has a young, educated, literate, numerate population with technological skills. And it's also an enormously rich country in terms of resources, and it has a very deep tradition. So all of those things, it is a gorgeous place to visit as well. I say that as a tourist, I love being here. But with all of those things, there's so much potential, which is why I see so many crypto companies have big staff here, and they're doing really, really good work. I come to Argentina now, I think almost once a year or once every year and a half, 2 years, to be re-energized about the spirit of crypto, because the spirit of crypto is alive in this country. And I come here every now and then just to refill my crypto batteries and be like, yeah, that's why we do it.
Great. It's great to recharge your crypto batteries here. It's a great thing to say.
Yes, with a lot of steak and Malbec to go with that.
Yeah, of course. And let's talk about the not so good things now. Have systemic corruption and hyperinflation opened the door for cryptocurrency to flourish? Just that, or is there something else we're not paying attention at on economic, on political side of corruption and hyperinflation and the other economical mishaps?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Argentina can be properly characterized as hyperinflation yet. I think it's certainly very, very bad inflation, but I don't think it's quite gone into hyperinflation yet. And I hope it doesn't, because that's enormously destructive for any country. Yes, political dysfunction is one of the drivers, but it's not enough, right? I mean, look at what's happening in the country I call my home, in the United States. Talk about political dysfunction. Anyway, that's not enough. And an economic crisis alone is not enough. And inflation alone is not enough. It takes a combination of factors and a willingness of the culture to explore alternatives. So it's not all bad. It's not just like, the other day I heard a quote by some executive at JP Morgan who was saying the only way crypto succeeds in the world is a doomsday scenario. And I hear that in crypto terms as well. A lot of people are like, and then the world economy will collapse and Bitcoin will go to the moon and we'll all be rich. I mean, that's a ridiculous idea. And also, you shouldn't want that, right? I don't believe in the apocalyptic scenarios and the idea that crypto only thrives if you have a disaster, an economic disaster of fundamental proportions. It's just that if you have a crisis and then another crisis, and it doesn't have to be a disaster, and another crisis and another crisis and another crisis, then eventually you grow up in an environment, just as I did in Greece, where your parents teach you from the very early days, oh no, pesos are for spending, dollars are for saving. And when you hear that as a child and that's beaten into you, and you were like, no, we spend it today because tomorrow it's not going to be worth anything, right? That kind of inflationary attitude towards money, distrust towards banks, distrust towards government institutions, it's bad, but it also is a healthy and realistic perspective on the world, because that's the norm. I grew up like that in Greece. I remember distrust towards banks and governments was part of the culture. You can imagine how surprised Americans would be if they had hyperinflation as they did in the early part of last century again, right? They are not prepared for that, not culturally, not generationally at all, for anything like that. They're not prepared for 15% inflation, let alone 40% inflation. So what that does, that slow change in the culture, that's what you need for crypto. You need to have an understanding of why the principles of neutrality, decentralization, and open platforms matter, and why those give you choice. And to do that, you have to stop believing the fairy tale, the mythology of strong government money, which is a lie, right? It's okay, they're in control of the economy. And in Argentina, you're like, they're not in control of everything. Anything, what are you talking? And in Greece, like if you say, don't worry, the government's in control, everyone in the room starts laughing, right?
Yeah.
That myth needs to be broken before you can see alternatives. You have to go for yourself. You have to think for yourself.
And speaking of on strong government money, how about regulation? Is there any good or bad regulation?
You need regulation when your money is controlled by humans who are infinitely corruptible, and political processes that change every 4 years, and where people are appointed to office based on which party they supported in the previous election. I remember one of the things that would happen in Greece was every 4 years when we had an election and we were doing this thing where we'd flip from one party to another, the new party would come in and they'd clear out the entire civil service and replace it with their own people because they supported them. And then 4 years later, they'd clear out again and put them back in. And that's crazy, right? But that happens a lot. So, you know, I've kind of lost the train of thought there. But this idea of this instability that you have in these political systems, they create the need for regulation to control human institutions that are failing. Well, in crypto we have regulation. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings about cryptocurrency. People are like, cryptocurrency isn't regulated. Are you kidding me? It's the most well-regulated system of money that we have ever built. I can tell you exactly how much Bitcoin is going to be issued in November of 2027, down to the Satoshi right now. Because we already know how the issuance work. I can tell you exactly how the algorithm is going to work. We know exactly how well regulated it is. It's regulated to that heartbeat that's been beating for 10 years without pause. So many people and companies have tried to change the system and they can't because the rules are working so well. That's regulation. That's predictable regulation. I wish we had more regulation in traditional currencies like that, where you could at least predict what's going to happen next week.
Yeah. Or tomorrow.
The problem with regulation is that it's so easily modified by whoever's interests happen to be in charge. Now, if you have very strong political institutions, then you can have regulatory organizations that are somewhat transparent and functional, and they maintain consistency and develop some predictability. But if your political institutions are weak, then regulation is just a tool used for whoever's interest is in charge each time. And the truth is that the majority of the world falls on that side, right? It's easy to say, let's regulate these things more cleanly by using institutions when you live in one of the 5 countries where institutions work. It's a lot harder if you live in one of the other 185 countries where they don't.
Yeah.
Or they do sometimes.
And how about privacy then? Most of us are concerned about the growing surveillance on citizens all over the world. It's happening in the US and Europe, and it's happening all over the world now.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that, and how it affects privacy on a citizenship level?
So to me, cryptocurrency is one of those tools that we can use to assert our privacy. And I'm a very strong advocate of privacy. I think privacy is a fundamental human right. Not just a fundamental human right, but also a foundational human right, which means that it becomes very difficult to exercise your other human rights if you don't have privacy. So you have freedom of speech, great, but if you say the wrong thing and they know who you are, then you can be punished. So you don't have freedom of speech without privacy. You have freedom of assembly and political association. Good luck trying to do that if they can get a list of the members of the illegal party and put them all in jail, right? So if you have privacy, then you can have speech. If you have privacy, you can have association. If you have privacy, you can have expression. You can have freedom of religion. You can have all of the other fundamental rights. Privacy is fundamental, and we've created a world that's upside down. Yeah. In my opinion, a moral and just world is one in which the average person, if they haven't committed a crime, and there's no evidence they've committed a crime, should have absolute privacy. Meanwhile, their government, which is acting as a representative of people, should have zero privacy, should have no secrecy, as they call it, which is their version of privacy. It's the special privacy, the luxury privacy, is when you have government secrets, right? So we live now in a world where it's exactly the opposite. Our governments have maximum privacy so that we don't know what they're doing, and they know everything about us, and yet they work for us. That's wrong. It's the wrong way around, and we need to take that back. Rights are like muscles. You have to exercise them or you lose them, right? So you don't ask for your rights. You don't say, please, may I have some privacy? You assert your rights and you say, I have privacy, respect it, or else, right? Yeah. That's how the politics of rights works. You have to take your rights, hold your rights, and assert them. And so when it comes to privacy, when people tell you the world won't be safe if we can see what everybody does with money, We have to see what everybody does with money. We have to see where you spend your money. Otherwise, terrorists, pornographers, pedophiles, whatever. The world operated for 80,000 years on 100% private money that was completely untraceable, and no one had any idea what anybody was doing. And what did people use money to do? Feed their children, house themselves, build education, healthcare, sanitation, clean water for the next generation. That's what they did with fully private money. In fact, if you give governments the ability to control and surveil money, they're the ones that are committing the massive crimes with money. And they're making sure that their secrecy protects them from scrutiny. Yeah. So privacy is fundamental. And privacy in money is equally fundamental because money is a very important tool in our society. With it, you can express your powers as a citizen. You can contribute to political parties. You can engage in trade and commerce. These are important activities for humans. So I will continue to be a very strong advocate of that. I think privacy is something that we need to strengthen in Bitcoin, not weaken. I think that regulations of exchanges and the demands to have small startup companies store the private information of thousands of users are idiotically dangerous and will only result in people losing their private information. And in the end, they don't protect anything, because you collect all of the information on the innocent people, and the criminals use the wallet that doesn't require their identity. And it's not hard to understand that if you make it criminal to operate without identity, then the only people who operate without identity are criminals who are already doing the criminal thing. And they don't have any reason to give you more information. You're punishing the innocent in order to catch the criminals, which is ridiculous.
And speaking about this dystopian scenario, yesterday you say we're getting into near a Huxley Brave New World
yes.
dystopia. I agree, but is it possible that the whole blockchain revolution ends up on the wrong hands? What would that scenario look like?
Oh, some of it will. Some of it will. The question is, can we keep some of it in our hands? Because this is the basic idea of technology in general, which is technology is simply a tool. It's neutral, it's agnostic, it doesn't see purpose or morality. It's what you put that tool to use. And some people will pick up a tool and use it for evil, right? You can look at a hammer and say, I can build 100 homes for the homeless with this. Or you can use it to bash your neighbor over the head. The intent is not in the tool. Blockchains and cryptocurrencies are neutral tools. And some people will use them to control others, to surveil others, to limit their choices, to present them with fake freedom and fake money that they can use to control them. And some of us will use them to give more freedom and more privacy to the world. And let's hope more people choose our path. And that's the best we can do.
Great. One final question. Are we, as humans, ready for a global, open, fully connected economy?
I think we're absolutely ready for a global, open, connected economy. In fact, because we have had a global, open, connected economy for thousands of years. The recent development of nation-state borders that limit the scope of trade is the aberration. The norm has been an open global economy and was for thousands of years. So yes, we're absolutely ready for that.
Okay, let's hope for the best then.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much, Andreas, for visiting us. Los invitamos a visitar Crypto 24/7, el principal medio de noticias cripto en español, y a suscribirse al canal de Ripio TV para recibir videos y updates semanales del mundo cripto. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Hasta luego.